I've just been into the Justice Select Committee who are looking into recruitment and retention on the operational line in the prison service. Very grateful for them for allowing me to give evidence. It's a much needed investigation and hopefully something will come of it which will improve the attrition rates in the service, encourage people to join the service and stay in the service more importantly, but there are a lot of issues to deal with if we're going to resolve that. So they went through everything from recruitment, how we recruit, how we vet people, the age of recruits, the salary, the working conditions, and of course more importantly the protections in place for our members and retirement age. Expecting people to work in the late 60s in that environment just is not practical. Yeah, so it was chaired by Bob Neal, who's a Tory MP, and there was a mixture of Labour and Tory MPs who were asking questions, which is a positive. Obviously we need cross-party support if we're going to improve life for our members within the service. So let's see what the evidence suggests, let's see what the report says when it's finalised, but more importantly, are the government going to act? Because let's be honest, it's all down to them that we're in such a mess with their budget cuts since 2010 and the lack of pay rises. We've been on pay freezes, pay pauses, and now we've got an increased retirement age with increased pension contributions. So it's down to them, we're in such a mess and only they can put it right. So hopefully this evidence session will enable them to act upon what's being said and enable them to support and protect and enhance that front line in our prisons. Obviously with the increased 20,000 prison spaces that are planned by the government, they're going to open more and more private sector jails, brand new jails. So they're going to have to recruit prison officers within the private sector. And the only way they can recruit prison officers within the private sector is now by actually competing with public sector pay. And what we're seeing more and more is that the starting salaries in the private sector are competitive with the public sector. And of course they start to poach our senior managers who've got all that experience, who we can ill afford to lose. So at this moment in time, the private sector have the same issues as the public sector, but they've got more autonomy to address it by increasing wages and making the job role more attractive for new recruits. I'm hoping for a couple of things after the evidence I've given today. One, I'm hoping for better pay for prison officers across the board that are competitive with the police and the border force, the fire service, to stop people leaving for other public sector bodies and other employment. So I'm hoping that they will take on board that we need palatable pay, which is competitive and increases the salaries of all our members. So that's one. Two, I hope they take on board that we really can't work in our late 60s, so they need to reduce the retirement age. If they allow us to retire from the age of 60 onwards with no abatement to our pensions, I think that would be a sensible solution, but I'm not in a position to enact that, only Treasury can. So I hope they take on board our retirement age. And I really do hope they take on board the fact that there are many people working within our prisons who have got no protection whatsoever, and specifically those who work with juvenile offenders in youth custody estate who are walking around the landings in a polo shirt, not even carrying a baton, no parva, no rigid bar cuffs. All they've got is a body-worn video camera, dealing with the most violent cohort we look after. I'm hoping that they rather rapidly agree that now is the time to roll out parva in youth custody estate to protect those people there. I'm going over to Portcullis House just across the road from the Palace of Westminster to attend the Joint Unions Prison Group meeting. That's with all the other unions in the public sector and a whole plethora of politicians who give us their unwavering support, which we're very grateful for. And we'll be specifically talking on behalf of the POA about restoring our right to strike, which is something I give evidence on in there, that if we're such an essential service to the running of the country, to the public, if we're so essential and you're going to withdraw our right to strike, why on earth would you expect us to work in our late 60s? You know, we need a lower retirement age, which is compatible with the fire service and the police. We haven't had the right to strike since 1994. Successive governments have refused to reinstate that right to strike, a basic human right. In Scotland, prison officers do have the right to strike. They've never exercised that right because they've got decent industrial relationships with their government who recognise that decent pay rises, you know, do assist in positive industrial relationships and in positive attrition rates within the Scottish service. So they've just got a decent 3-year pay deal off their government and they have the right to strike. We don't have the right to strike. We haven't since 1994. And it's quite ironic, isn't it, that they're now trying to implement more draconian anti-trade union legislation that restricts the right to strike for those unions that do have it. Minimum service levels, what are they going to look like? Every time we've taken industrial action, we have always retained minimum service levels to keep those in our charge, you know, safe as they possibly can be. It makes no sense whatsoever, but let's see what the legislation says and let's see what they come up with. I mean, if any public sector unions want to talk to the POA about, restricted strike action and the legislation that we're subject to, then feel free to do so, because we've been there since the 90s. I can't see us getting it reinstated anytime soon, but we'll keep campaigning for it. It's a basic human right of any workforce to withdraw your labour. We haven't had it, but we're fighting for it. I'm positive about today. I think I got everything that my members would wish me to say on their behalf over to the Select Committee, and let's see where it leads.